Hey guys.
Hi everybody.
Welcome to another Sunday evening, Sunday night. I guess in the U.S. it's Sunday afternoon.
Wait, no, it's Monday.
Oh yeah, Monday.
We're late today. It's Monday.
Monday video this week.
Another weekly video.
Weekly video. This week we're in northern France, and I think it's pronounced Reims. We thought it was Reims, R-E-I-M-S.
Rims. I think it's rims.
Yeah, well, turns out the World Cup is here, and we didn't know that. We planned this trip like 5 or 6 months ago now, so we got here yesterday, and the host of the Airbnb mentioned the World Cup today, and we were like, oh, we didn't know that was here.
Yeah, we literally didn't even know the Women's World Cup was going on, so sorry about that, U.S. National soccer team. We didn't know the World Cup was going on, nor did we know that it was in France, nor did we know that the USA was playing today.
Yep. So we went online, looked up tickets, and it looked like they were all going to be really expensive. We went to the stadium. It was like on our way to the downtown area, and got tickets for $15 each. So it was pretty awesome. It was really exciting in that stadium.
It was a pretty crazy day. So yeah, we're coming to you guys a little bit later than anticipated today because we sort of got derailed by the game. We had no idea what time we would get back home and all that. So it was pretty fun. And the USA won. Yes,
it was awesome. So tonight we're going to be talking about investing as a traveler. So that's a question I think a lot of new prospective travel therapists are finding this website, Travel Therapy Mentor, and this Facebook page. And from that, they're going to the Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist Facebook page and website and reading some finance articles. So I've been getting a lot of questions recently about investing and paying down debt and things like that. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We did a previous video on paying down student loan debt, and we'll touch on some of the same things, but maybe go a little bit more in depth this time. But I'm going to get this video shared in a few different groups, try to get some people in here. And Whitney's going to introduce us.
Yep. Awesome. So like Jared kind of alluded to, my name is Whitney Aiken, and
I'm Jared Kazaza.
Yeah, and we are both behind Travel Therapy Mentor and also our website, Fifth Wheel Physical Therapist, which is kind of our personal blog where Jared writes a lot about finances. We are both physical therapists. We've been traveling physical therapists for about 4 years now, and we're currently taking some time off from work and traveling internationally. We're on a trip in Europe right now for about 15 weeks, and we're about a little over a month into the trip, so we've got a couple more months left in the trip. And as Jared mentioned, we're in France right now. We've already been to Portugal and Spain. But yeah, we've been doing these weekly videos for a few months now and sharing some different topics and different ideas. And we wanted to touch a little bit about savings and investing as far as travel therapists go, because as a lot of you guys know, you can make more money as a travel therapist, but it depends, how much you save of it. Your expenses are one part of this equation, and then once you do save a lot of it, a lot of people want to know, where should I put this extra savings? What should I do with it? So that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight. Jared is definitely more of the financial guru than I am. I'm learning as I go, but he has a passion for finance and reading and learning about a lot of this information. So he's done a lot of research on his own, tons of reading, tons of blogs and podcasts and books and all types of information for years. So any information that we share is just based on our knowledge and our experiences, mostly Jared's knowledge. Please do keep in mind anything we talk about, we are physical therapists, we're not financial advisors. So if you have more questions, we can point you in the direction of some resources to learn more about saving and investing yourself. And if you need information further than that or assistance with your particular accounts or portfolio, we'd recommend reaching out to a financial advisor who is licensed in that area.
Yep.
But as we had mentioned in our announcement yesterday and today for our video tonight, we also have another big announcement. And we're actually, we popped some champagne before this.
This is the Champagne region of France.
So we're in what's called the Champagne region of France, where where champagne originated in this part of France. So we had to buy some champagne, of course, and then also we were like, oh, we'll celebrate the World Cup, and then we'll celebrate our big news that we wanted to share with you guys tonight. So we're not getting married, and we're not having a baby, so it's not any of that kind of news. It's more like business news.
And we just found out that in November, we will be presenting at the National Student Conclave in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Yeah, we're super excited.
And we'll be talking almost exactly about this topic, finances and how that relates to basically getting ahead in your finances by being a travel therapist.
Yeah.
It's basically the two things I'm most excited to talk about and most passionate about mixed together. But I'm very nervous about doing that. Even though we do these live videos every week, it's really hard for me to talk in front of a big audience. So it'll be interesting. So
it's gonna be interesting. So yeah, we're super excited. So our big news that we wanted to share is that we will be presenting at NSC this year, the National Student Conclave. So I know there's a lot of you guys that have reached out to us through Travel Therapy Mentor that are current students. We've talked to first years, second years, third years. So we'd love to know if you guys are going to be at NSC this year. If you would, just leave us a comment. Whether you're watching this live, I see a couple people are tuned in live, or whether you're watching it later on the replay, we'd love if you just comment below and say whether you're going to be going to the National Student Conclave this year. It is October 31st through November the 2nd, and it's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which we're super pumped about because we've never really been out west, and we've definitely never been to Albuquerque before. So it's going to be a super fun event for us. We're going to find out some more details about exactly what it is we're going to be doing, but the preliminary information we found out is that we'll be doing kind of like 2 different breakout sessions where students will have the opportunity to come and learn more about travel therapy and how that can impact your financial position after graduation. So
yeah, and chances are we'll probably also be at a booth there somewhere, but we don't know where we'll be yet. But yeah, we'd love to meet some of you guys, and if you guys have questions about anything and want to come talk to us in person, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're super excited about that, and that was our big news we wanted to share with you guys. So yeah, let's get into talking about tonight about saving and investing as a travel therapist.
Yep. So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I get a lot of questions about this now, and especially from travel therapists, because we make more money as travel therapists, and people want to know, what should I do with the money? Obviously, the very first thing that most people do with the money is start paying down their student loans or credit card debt or whatever they accumulated in grad school and undergrad. But a lot of people are interested in investing too, especially since I write about that a lot, and write about like how much I've saved and invested and how well it's done over the last few years. So I get a lot of questions about that.
So just to kind of recap, like the reason why we're talking about this in particular due to travel therapy. So, I mean, of course, everyone in the world needs to understand how to save and hopefully how to invest. But in particular for travel therapists, the big difference is you have the potential to make higher income than a regular permanent therapy job. So if you took a permanent physical therapy job or OT job or CODA job or SLP or etc., you have the opportunity to make a lot more money by doing travel therapy. Now, a lot of people will come back and say, yeah, but your expenses are a lot higher because you have to duplicate housing. That's true. So the other big part of this equation is if you can continue to live frugally and save and decrease your expenses at home as well as your expenses at your travel site so that you can keep more of that money at the end of the day.
Yep, and we've made some comments about that on previous videos about some ways that you can save money on housing while traveling and save money on your tax home while traveling. But yeah, that's often sometimes you can make twice as much, but you do have to duplicate expenses, which means that your expenses are higher than they normally would be. But even with that taken into account, for us at least, I've done the calculations many times, and it's probably somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 more a year after taxes that we make as travelers compared to a permanent job, and that's factoring in those duplicate expenses and having to pay for short-term housing and all that stuff. So it's still significantly more, and so if you can put that $20,000 or $30,000 extra towards something that brings you in some kind of return, that's great. Yeah. Whether that's paying down debt or investing.
Hi Jeff, I see Jeff's tuning in with us tonight. If anybody else is on live, I see a few of you are on live right now. We'd appreciate if you just leave us a comment below and say hi. Hi Mom. Just say hi if you're tuning in live. Click the like button, click the heart button, anything to let us know you're there on the other side of this video.
What's the weather like in the U.S. right now? Because in France it is hot.
It's hot.
And
it's supposed to be...
later this week it's supposed to be close to 100, and we do not have AC here because it usually doesn't get that hot. So it is it's pretty rough right now.
Yeah, so we're a little shiny. So yeah, we're just jumping into the topic for tonight. We already made our big news announcement, which is that we're going to be speaking at the National Student Conclave later this year. Hi George, thanks for tuning in. So yeah, we want to talk a little bit about where, now we've talked about the fact you can make higher income, and as long as you live frugally, you'll be able to save more of your money. Yep. Hi Aldwin, thanks for tuning in. Looks like hot everywhere. Maybe it's a heat wave not nationwide, but
worldwide.
Worldwide.
Prestige worldwide.
So we want to talk a little bit about now you understand how you can make more money and how you can hopefully save more of that money. Now, what should you do with the extra money that you're saving?
Yeah, whether you choose to pay down debt or invest, I would say the first thing you should do would be to save a emergency fund. So I just wrote an article about this on a bus here yesterday, but you want an emergency fund, especially as a traveler, because everybody has unexpected things that pop up that are that cost you a lot of money, like car breaking down, medical expenses, stuff like that you can't really plan for. But as a traveler, we have even more unexpected expenses that might pop up, like canceled contracts, and if you're driving across the country, you have a lot higher probability of a car breaking down than if you're just commuting a few miles each day. So things like that can pop up, or
maybe a family member across the country falls ill, or there's an emergency back home and you have to cancel your contract in Alaska and fly all the way back home to North Carolina. So there's some things that you need to prepare for that could happen.
Yeah.
And have an emergency fund set up. And what is an emergency fund?
An emergency fund is just basically what I would recommend is somewhere between 3 and 6 months of expenses. At some point, obviously you're not going to have that right away when you start traveling, but at some point while you're traveling, try to save up 3 to 6 months worth of expenses, and you'd have that money liquid or some way that you can get to quickly. So like a savings account or a checking account or a money market account mostly.
Yeah, so this is basically your cash savings. You don't have to have it physically in cash under the mattress, but yes, in a checking account and maybe a high yield savings account that you can access pretty quickly, but maybe still earning like a little bit of interest, a little bit more than a checking account.
Yeah, so things like, what if you have a contract that doesn't work out, or you were supposed to be, what I see a lot of travelers do is they'll accept a job and then hope that the license goes through by the time the job start date happens. But sometimes that gets pushed back like a month. And if you don't have some kind of savings set aside, especially if that coincides with some other big expense, like your car breaks down and your assignment gets pushed back, if you don't have some kind of savings, that's a recipe for going into credit card debt, which is definitely what you want to avoid. So somewhere between 3 and 6 months is ideal. At least a couple months at the minimum is what you want to have saved at very first. So before you start paying down debt or investing.
Yeah, so this definitely goes for travel therapists, but this is the financial advice that most people would give you regardless of whether you're a travel therapist. When you're first allocating funds, go ahead and set aside some cash or some initial savings that's liquid, like Jared said.
Yeah, Alderman Dave Ramsey, I think, is really, really great for getting in a good financial position, paying down debt. He's had more success than almost any other financial advisor or person that I know of. So that's a great starting place. But from there, you can definitely branch out into other things like investment-wise, or there's some things he says I don't agree with, but for the most part, he's a very good place to start.
So Aldwin asked the question, what about Dave Ramsey? And that's something that we hear about a lot, and people ask Jared a lot. And it is a good starting place, but like Jared said, there's a lot of things that we don't necessarily agree that he says, or that you can kind of advance beyond the Dave Ramsey mindset. Like a huge one is credit cards. We definitely advocate for using credit cards the correct way. Part of this trip, this 4-month trip around Europe was funded by credit cards because we use them the right way. But yeah, if you're going to go into debt, then you should avoid credit cards. But some other things like, paying down your debt and living frugally and things that he promotes is a great foundation, is a great start for someone, especially someone who doesn't know a lot about finances. Like if I hadn't had Jared to teach me, I probably would have benefited from reading some of the Dave Ramsey stuff.
Definitely.
So,
okay, so then after you have the emergency fund saved,
emergency fund is number one.
Then you need to decide between paying down debt or investing, right? When I say debt, usually what I'm referring to here is student loan debt, because that's mostly what people in the therapy world are concerned about.
Especially DPTs.
But first thing would be consumer debt. So things like if you have a high interest rate on a car, or if you have a credit card debt, or if you have, what else would you have? Any kind of consumer debt. Hopefully you don't have like those payday loan type debt or anything like that. But yeah, any of those debts with high interest, definitely get rid of those first, because even things like tax advantages in an IRA or a 401k are not going to touch the amount of debt on like a 22% credit card. So that would be the very next thing. So, or even maybe before the emergency fund, you want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So those things would be 1 and 2 for sure. Getting rid of high interest rate debt, saving an emergency fund. And then from there is when you start looking at, should you pay down this massive student loan amount, or should you start investing in other income producing assets?
Right. And this is something that Jared has written several articles about. So if you are someone who's interested, like I know Aldwin is a new grad. If anybody else is tuning in that is a new grad or a soon to be new grad, well, I guess I would have graduated, but if you're a new grad and you're trying to decide, okay, now what do I do with my student loans? If you would just comment new grad below in the video, we can link to some of the articles Jared has written about how to best handle your student loans. Now, a lot of people jump into travel therapy to pay them down as quickly as possible, which is a great idea. This is number one reason that a lot of new grads get into travel therapy, because they're like, look, I can still live like a broke college kid for a little longer and then just shovel all this extra money towards my student loans, no problem. And that's a great method for a lot of people. Yeah. There is this other flip side of it that Jared and I have chosen to do based on some calculations that Jared ran and some different articles he's read and things.
Before we get too much into that, let's break student loans down into either public or private student loans too. Because
but let me just finish what I was going to say. Okay. But the other option that I was getting at is that we've chosen to do student loan forgiveness.
Yeah.
So it's the option of, are you going to pay it down as quickly as possible or go for forgiveness? But we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, so once you have an emergency fund, pay down the high interest rate debt. So all that extra money should be going to those two things probably first. From there, the student loans are broken down into private and public student loans, right? So private student loans almost always have a higher interest rate than the public loans. So normally, I've had several people contact me with interest rates on private loans somewhere around 8 to 10%. So the likelihood of getting that amount of return in the market might be, 30 or 40%. It's not high. So if you have student loans that are between, 7 and 10% interest that are private loans, I would get rid of those as quickly as possible. As far as the public loans, the ones that, are from Sally Mae or whatever, then you can start looking at, should you go pay it down as quickly as possible, like a lot of travelers do, and that's always the safest route, or should you make the minimum payments, maybe go for forgiveness and invest instead and hope to get a better return in the market? And that's where things get a little more iffy. It depends on your risk tolerance and things like that. But private loans, I have a hard time making a case for investing over paying down private loans as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So I would say usually it would go get rid of high interest rate credit card debt, emergency fund, kind of doing those two things at the same time. Next, private student loans, get rid of those as soon as possible. And then is where you diverge either into investing as much as possible or paying down your public student loans.
Or maybe you're super lucky and you don't have any student loans.
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about any of this.
Yeah, I know George just finished paying his debt. I'm sure that felt really good.
Yeah, I've known some people who don't have any student loans, and that's awesome because then you're starting in a wonderful financial situation right out of the gate, and then you can just skip ahead in the video to the part where you start talking about investing. But
between
anyway.
the two of us, I know that now our student loan has been growing since we've been making the minimum payments. I think we're somewhere around probably 270 or 280,000 between the two of us. So.
That's a lot.
And I know a lot of PTs have way more than that.
Way more than that.
Yeah, that can be on the low end.
So for example, for me, even though I have chosen to do the student loan forgiveness route for all of my public loans, which are the ones through the education, government,
Department of Education.
Department of Education. The Department of Education is who your public loans are through, but you might have a different loan servicer, like mine. Yours is Navient, and mine's Great Lakes. But I had one student loan that was a private loan, which was Sally Mae. There's a couple flies in here that keep flying by. It's really hot.
There's also a rabbit in here, if you guys want to see this rabbit. Our Airbnb host has a rabbit, so...
Yeah, so if you hear any weird noises, it's the rabbit.
Yeah, it makes noise. It's crazy. It jumps all around in that cage.
So anyway, I went ahead. I just had like a $5,000 loan that I took out, a private loan through Sally Mae. For a summer class one summer, and so I just paid that off immediately, like within my first 3 months of traveling, because I think that was like 8% or whatever. So I immediately paid that one off, just got that one out of the way, and then my public loans, my Department of Education ones, are the ones that we're seeking forgiveness.
Yeah, and I guess we should mention too that those private loans, not only do they usually have higher interest rates, but they also don't have any of the benefits of the public loans, like possible loan forgiveness, forbearance. I think that might be it, but the potential loan forgiveness is really public service loan forgiveness is a possibility. So if you have private loans, you don't get any of that. So that's why they're almost always better to get rid of first. But yeah, the public loans, you have a lot more options. There's a lot more flexibility there. So that's why we've chosen to keep it and invest. But yeah, if I had any private loans, we got rid of Whitney's private loans right away. If I had any, I would also get rid of those. So that would always be the next step. But then, so deciding between investing or paying down the public loans is a little tougher. For most people, I would say if you're at all risk adverse or you don't want to put the time into thinking about investing, or if you don't have the constitution, I guess, to be able to put up with a big drop in the stock market, which is not highly likely, but in the next 5 years, we're going to have some kind of pretty significant correction, I would say, in the market. This is the longest bull market we've ever had in the history of the country. So it's definitely likely we'll have some kind of correction. And if you're putting a lot of money in there and then you see that number drop, the worst thing you can do is panic and take it out. So if you're someone that thinks you might do that, then paying down your student loans is probably a great way to go.
Okay. So I'm going to give the quick finance for dummies version of what Jared's talking about. Why would you not pay off your student loans? Most people are like, if I'm making extra money, I'll just pay off my student loans. Duh. Most people, that makes sense. Most people, you're like, I would love to just see that number go away, just get rid of all my debt, because especially with travel therapy, the standard repayment is 10 years. So for most people, if you're just doing a standard repayment, you're like, okay, I'm gonna hold on to this debt for 10 years and just pay the payment that they've decided for me over 10 years. And then when I'm 35 or however old, if you're a traditional student who went straight through, I'll be done with it. But we know a lot of people that make more money as travel therapists, and you could easily pay it down in 2, 3, 4 years and just be done with it. And then you're still, maybe if you're a traditional student who graduated at 25 or whatever, still 30 or less and don't have any student loan debt. And then you start thinking about retirement savings at 30 and start investing in your 401k and start investing in your IRA and those types of things, and then putting money into savings accounts, or thinking about if you're the person who wants to save for your kids' retirement or your kids' college or that sort of thing. So for most people, that's what makes sense. Now, this thing that Jared and I are talking about, Jared had figured out that basically if you apply for a student loan forgiveness program, which is the one
it's an income-based repayment option.
Income-based repayment option.
That leads to some sort of forgiveness after either 20 or 25 years.
Right. So they will determine a minimum payment that you have to pay. For me, for example, I think I started with $140,000 in debt or something like that. So they determine, based on my current income, how much I have to pay over 20 years, whichever one you pick, the repay option, or the pay-as-you-earn option, or the revised pay-as-you-earn option, etc. If I pick one of these income-based repayment plans, it'll either be 20 years or 25 years, and I'll pay small payments, not the full payment that you pay for a 10-year plan, over that amount of time. And at the end, whatever is left, they'll forgive. Now, in the meantime, I'm making a bunch of extra money. So what Jared had figured out is if you instead, all that extra money I'm making, put that into investments, and then let your investment accounts grow, your 401k, your IRA, your stock market accounts, whatever, you're letting that grow. So then you're kind of paying yourself first and then just sort of paying the government back along the way because of something called I'm just blanking, it must be the champagne, when you start investing early and then you
compound interest.
Yeah, so because of compound interest, you benefit by going ahead and starting investing when you're as early as possible, when you're 24, 25, 26, instead of waiting until 30, 40, 50 to start investing. So that's what we're talking about kind of in a nutshell, is we have chosen to go ahead and just more or less defer our loans or pay the minimum over 25 years and seek forgiveness on an income-driven repayment plan while we are taking this extra money and putting it into investments.
Yep. And the only way that makes sense is if you expect to get a higher return from the investments than you do from your interest rate, because your loans are growing at a certain percent while your investments are growing at a certain percent. If the interest on the loans is accumulating quicker than your investments are growing, then that doesn't make any sense. So the only way this makes sense is if you invest in things that you expect to have a higher yield than the interest rates on the loans. And so most people's loans are probably around 6% or 6.5%. The average stock market return over the last 100 years, 90 to 100 years, has been around 8 or 9% after inflation's factored in. So chances are over the long term, so that doesn't mean over a 10-year period, you might have a zero return or whatever. There's some really bad 10-year periods or 5-year periods or 1-year periods. But over the long term, you should expect to get a return somewhere around 8 to 10%. So over a long, long time horizon, you should return higher than that. But the way we plan to do it is on the revised pay-as-you-earn plan for student loans, half of the interest accumulated each month is forgiven. So let's say our interest rate is 6% when it's all averaged together. So if my payment is $0 a month, which my payment is $0 a month right now, my income was so low this past year, only working half the year as a traveler, that my payment is $0. So half of the accumulated interest each month is forgiven, which means, say, I'm accumulating $600 in interest. I'm only adding to my balance $300 each month. Whereas, so that basically reduces my effective interest rate down to about 3% or maybe 3.2, 3.3%. So basically, my investment accounts only have to beat that number, that 3 to 3.5% number. So as long as my investments are returning anywhere higher than that, I'm going to come out better investing. So that's how I came to the conclusion that I came to invest instead of paying down the debt quickly.
Right.
And that makes sense for us. That doesn't make sense for everybody.
Right, and this is very much a numbers-based approach. Financially, numerically, it makes sense. But if it emotionally doesn't make sense to you, if emotionally and mentally you need to just be done with that debt, and that's your first priority, be done with that debt. Use all your extra income as a travel therapist to pay down that debt. Be done with it in 3 to 5 years, hopefully, and then move on from there and use the rest of your income after that to do whatever it is that you want to do. Start investing for retirement, buy a house, start saving for your kids' college fund, whatever it is that you want to do from that point.
Yep.
If, like I said, that's a lot of detail, and this mostly pertains to new grads that Jared's talking to, and mostly pertains to new grads with high student loan debt. So if you are a new grad that's tuning in, just comment new grad in the comments, and we can share those articles so you can understand in a little more depth of what Jared's talking about why you would possibly go on an income-driven repayment plan. And choose to invest instead.
Yeah, and this is something that you want to put a lot of thought into and probably consult with a professional before you make any kind of decision on that. But yeah, I mean, this is something I've gone back and forth on, but numerically it makes sense to do for us what we're doing, but that definitely is not for everyone.
Right.
So then to add to that, so let's say all I have to beat is, let's say 3.5% that my loans are accumulating at. That's assuming that the loans are never forgiven. So right now my loans are growing at 3.5% per year. My investments over the last 4 years or so since we started working have grown somewhere around 8 or 9%. So they're definitely outpacing the interest on the loans right now, but there's no guarantee that'll last. I mean, tomorrow the stock market could drop 10%. That, and all that could be wiped out with like a bear market. So there's no guarantees in the stock market. So you have to be careful about that. But so yeah, definitely consult someone before you make any decision like that. But you should definitely consider all the options when you're trying to decide if you should pay down your debt or go and hope for forgiveness. And so like I said, that is all assuming that forgiveness never happens. But if forgiveness does happen at some point in the future, then it'll be even less than the 3.5% interest rate I had to beat, right? Because that number is growing 3.5% per year. At the end to be forgiven, I would owe taxes on that total amount, which would probably be maybe 30 or 35% in taxes that I would owe, which would mean that what I would end up having to pay is way less than maybe even that starting balance. So there's a lot of factors to consider. Some people don't think loan forgiveness will ever happen. Some people think that that will just be repealed sometime before it ever gets to that 20 or 25 years for people, and that's possible. So
yeah, but we don't think that.
We don't think that, but even if it did happen, I still think that what we're doing will work out better than paying down the debt quickly for us.
Yeah. So again, we could talk for days about student loan forgiveness and that side of the coin, but there's a lot of you that maybe that doesn't pertain to, and maybe you just want to know, okay, maybe you're planning on doing both. Maybe you're planning on paying down your student loans pretty rapidly while also setting aside a little bit into savings or a little bit into investing. Or maybe you don't have a lot of student loan debt, or you're not a new grad. Maybe you're going into travel therapy later and you want to know about just the investing side of things and the savings side of things. So we'll talk a little bit about that too. So just to recap, we talked about an emergency fund is really important. Paying off debt if that's something that you
Consumer
have.
debt, high interest rate debt.
Paying off student loans if that's something that's important to you.
Private
and then,
ones first, and then public.
Yep.
Usually.
And then the last thing is going to be investing. So we want to talk about investing and how that works as a travel therapist, like talking about 401ks, working with different companies, talking about an IRA, a brokerage account. What are all these things?
Yep.
Because I know a lot of you guys are, you're therapists, your PTs, your OTs, your speech therapists. You don't know about investing. I didn't. Jared just chooses to read a lot about this and has done a lot of research, and he's taught me a lot. And again, we can share some resources that Jared has found valuable in learning about investing, but we just want to do a brief outline of some things to consider when it comes to investing.
Yeah. So another thing to consider is the tax advantages that come along with investing in retirement accounts. So things like 401k, IRA. So Whitney and I both have chosen to, as part of our investing, to max out our 401k and our IRAs each year. So we get tax advantages from, or tax savings basically from doing that, instead of, if we had allocated that money towards paying down debt, you don't get any sort of, tax advantage from that. So that, 3.5% interest rate that I was talking about trying to beat after half of it is subsidized from the repay plan, that makes it even easier to beat, because now you have these tax advantages from these retirement accounts. So, 401k is basically a retirement account set up for you by an employer that you're contributing to. An IRA is an individual retirement account. So it's basically almost like a 401k, but instead of being set up for you through a company, it's one that you set up yourself that you're able to allocate however you want, instead of being limited to certain options like a 401k would be.
So talking about those two accounts, a 401k or an IRA, these are accounts that you're going to contribute to, and you're going to get tax benefits, tax cuts basically for contributing either when you contribute or you withdraw. And the difference in these accounts versus a brokerage account, which is over here, is you can't access the funds until you are 65, with some exceptions. There are some ways that you can access it, but in general, they're set up so you don't access them until you're age 65. Versus in a brokerage account, which is a traditional, like you just invest money in the stock market or in bonds on your own, you can access that money anytime you want. So that's kind of the outline of how we're talking about these things.
Yeah, so the pros of using a 401k or an IRA is that you get additional tax savings. The cons is that that money is not easily accessible. So, you probably, if you're investing, you want to put some in each different place, because, you want to have your emergency fund in case. You probably want to have some money that you'll be able to access, like in a brokerage account for maybe, like, I don't know, say you're going to travel for 6 years and you plan on buying a house. Maybe you put the money in there invested for that 6-year period, while you have your retirement savings, your 401k and your IRA separate. So you probably want to split the money between all of these things, right?
But then consider that all of these things could all be in the stock market. So all three of those accounts, your 401k, your IRA, and your brokerage account, could all be volatile depending on what the stock market is doing. So it's important for you, depending on your risk tolerance, to have some money in cash and savings and checkings.
Or bonds, or you want to diversify somehow.
Diversified portfolio, that's the main key theme here.
Yep. So that's something that I think a lot of people find confusing that I talk to. I take for granted that people understand, like a 401k. Some people think you put money in your 401k and it's automatically invested for you, or you put money in an IRA and it's automatically invested, right? That's not how they work. So a 401k or an IRA doesn't earn interest like a savings account would. You put the money in there and then you choose where it goes. So when you invest in a 401k, you'll get a list of options for like stocks or bonds or whatever the company has that you choose from. And when you choose that, then that's where they allocate the money. The IRA, it's kind of the same thing, except you have a lot bigger list that you can choose from, like thousands and thousands of funds. Anything that you can invest in that's publicly traded, you can contribute and invest into in your IRA. So it's not just you put the money in there and it earns interest. It's you put the money in there, you come up with whatever allocation you want. So whatever you want to put towards bonds or domestic stocks or international stocks or even energy funds or precious metals or any of those things. 401ks usually don't have all those options, but an IRA you could put money wherever you want, or a brokerage account you could put money wherever you want, any of those things. So within those accounts you have to determine where you want to actually put the money.
So I want to do a quick poll. We have a few people tuning in live, and maybe some of you guys will be watching on the replay. For those of you that are tuning in right now, I want you to rate your financial knowledge. I want you to rate your financial knowledge between 1 and 10 and comment below. So if you, or maybe 0. If you have 0 financial knowledge and you have no idea what Jared's talking about, put 0. If you feel like you're an all-star and Jared's just talking stuff that's so basic.
I'm not at the 10. I would rate myself like
put a 10. If you're somewhere in the middle and you might know like a little bit about investing and a little bit about finances, you know what the term 401k means, maybe just put a 5. Somewhere. I want you guys to go ahead and rate yourself from 1 to 10 how financially knowledgeable you are. So I will wait for the poll answers to come in. Okay, so Holly says she's a 4. Okay, Holly, I'd probably be like, back before I met Jared, I would probably be like a 2. Jeff said he's a 5, and when he met Jared, he feels like he's a 7.5. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you read some of the articles. Aldwin says he's a 2 to 3.
Nice. Adam definitely knows a lot about finances. I
Adam's
believe
an 11.
I'd be you're 11. You probably know more than me.
I'm probably like, even after dating Jared for 6 years and reading some stuff, I'm probably still only like a 6.
So we talked about 401k, IRA, brokerage accounts. Hopefully that makes sense. So in each of those accounts, you'll be able to allocate money however you want towards whatever investments you want. And then you have hopefully your emergency fund. You might have student loans still. Hopefully you don't have any consumer debt. Get rid of all that. So then you can talk about either traditional or Roth IRAs, which is, and sometimes there's even traditional or Roth 401ks. And so that adds an additional level of complexity because the way you get tax advantages for both, but the way that those advantages basically happen is different. So a traditional IRA, you get a tax break up front, where when you contribute money to your traditional IRA or your 401k, that reduces your taxable income in that year, which means that you pay less taxes in the year that you contribute. Whereas with a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, you pay the taxes up front, but then when you withdraw the money, you don't pay any taxes on the gains through that whole time. So let's say you contributed to a Roth $5,000 after taxes. So you would get, say you get your paycheck each week and you contribute $100, and at the end of the year you have $5,000 in there. Basically, that money, say over a 30-year period, it grows to $100,000. You could withdraw all that at age 65 and pay no taxes on it, right? Whereas a traditional 401k or a traditional IRA, you get the tax break up front, that money grows, and then you pay taxes on it when you withdraw it. So say same scenario, you have 5,000, it grows to 100,000, you withdraw 20,000 a year or so, you pay taxes on that 20,000 withdrawal then instead of paying taxes on that initial 5,000 up front. So whether you want to choose traditional or Roth, there's arguments for both. I've written 6,000 or 7,000 words now on
Probably
my opinion.
3 articles about Roth versus
more than that.
Yeah.
And everyone has different opinions on that, and definitely something for everyone to research. But yeah, deciding between those is definitely a good thing early on. Or you can split between the two.
The biggest thing I learned was a lot of people were promoting for the young population, the traditional students who are starting out in their career, to contribute to a Roth early in your career. Their argument was that you would have a lower tax bracket or be making less money in the beginning of your career than you would towards the end of your career. But Jared...
And there's a good argument for that for travelers. And the reason being, travelers, we only pay taxes on our taxable income while we're traveling. So for most travelers, that's going to be $40,000 or less per year. So that's pretty low tax brackets already. Well, let's say you travel for 5 years and then you go into a permanent job and you work that permanent job for a 30-year career or something like that, and you're making at the end of your career $110,000, $120,000, say 30 years from now, as a manager or something like that. And then you retire and you're used to living at that higher level of income. You've been spending, say, $100,000 a year, and then in retirement you want to live on that same level of income. Well, then if you withdraw that money from the retirement account, then when you're basically having to withdraw $100,000 a year versus when you contributed it while you're working and you're making 40, you're going to pay higher taxes at that point. So there's a good argument to be made there.
Right.
And
so what Jared has explained to me and what I've learned over time and reading some about it and talking to Jared about it is it's not as much how much you make, but how much you plan to spend in retirement.
Yeah.
So if you contribute to the Roth in the beginning, you'll pay taxes based on how much money you make now. So if you're a travel therapist now and your taxable income is only 40 or 50,000 or less, maybe if you're a CODA or a PTA, you're going to pay lower taxes now than you might pay later in retirement when you're withdrawing. Maybe you're used to living at a standard of living of $60 or $70 or $80,000, and in retirement you plan to withdraw that much every year. If you don't plan to live on that much money when you retire, like say you're making a lot now, but later when you retire, or maybe even like Jared is, you're making a lot now, but you're only actually living on a little. And when you retire, you're only planning on living on a little. Then when you withdraw money later, you're actually gonna be in a lower tax bracket later because you're not gonna be earning income when you're retired. your only income that you earn is the income you withdraw from your own
Or
401k.
possibly Social Security or dividends from investments or rental properties. So there are ways that you could still earn income, but for the most part, your job is usually the main source of income.
So you have to think about how much money you're earning now and how much money you're withdrawing in retirement. But either way, just invest.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you choose to invest, just invest.
And if you're confused, mix it between the two or the three. So say put a third of it in a brokerage account and a third of it in the 401k and a third of it in Roth. I mean, if you do something like that, you really can't go wrong. At least, you're diversified between the accounts.
Right. So Holly asked, do you think it's worth having a financial advisor? Maybe, maybe not. So I want to talk a little bit about maybe you seek financial counsel once just to understand the gist of it versus having someone actively manage your accounts. If you're not somebody who thinks that you can read up on this or learn about this stuff on your own, it might be worth talking to a financial advisor once. Or if you're somebody who really just wants to be very hands-off and just wants to pay a financial advisor to do it for you, maybe. Yeah. But also I think that there's a lot of information out there now that's free, and Jared has directed me towards a lot of books and blogs and podcasts just to learn the basics. And honestly, I mean, he does a lot of it for me. I signed up for a 401k with our company, and I signed up for an IRA, and then you just literally, if you already do online banking, say you have two bank accounts, say you have a Wells Fargo and a SunTrust account, and you transfer money electronically between the two, that's all you do to contribute to an IRA. You just literally make a Vanguard account or a Fidelity account on their website, and you say, where are the funds going to come from? And I say, my Wells Fargo account, and I just transferred the money, the $6,000 or whatever the maximum is for the year, into that account from my bank account. And then you just have to click the button that says where you want the funds to go. That part can be a little complicated, and Jared's going to talk a little bit about that here in a little while. You just say, I want it to go. I mean, you could put all of your investments in Apple if you wanted to, but that would be stupid. You could put it in individual stocks, but that's more volatile. Or you could put it, Jared's going to talk, we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here about investment or index funds are the best thing to put it in, really. So Holly, I mean, there's a lot that you can, even from a dumbed down perspective, honestly, 6 years ago, I would have been lower than you on the finance scale. I would have been at a 2. I wouldn't have even known what a 401k was. There's a lot that you can read.
Yeah, that was me probably 7 or 8 years ago. So I've learned a ton in the last.
So it doesn't have to be complicated. There's a lot you can read and learn and listen to podcasts on your own. All you gotta do is just open an account, put some money in it, allocate the funds, where it's going to go, and then just leave it. Just don't touch it again. Yeah,
in reality, there's probably 2 or 3 books that you could read, and you would have a good enough knowledge that you could mainly do things on your own. Mm-hmm. The scary part is when there's a drop in the market and you start getting fearful and you're like, oh man, what if this never stops dropping? Then it's sometimes nice to have someone to be like, hey, it's going to be fine. Someone to basically almost baby you. I need that sometimes. I get nervous about some of the volatility in the stock market sometimes, and I'm like, oh man, what if I'm missing something? What if it drops 90% this time? Very unlikely, but things like that can happen. So it's nice to have an advisor for that. I would say that if you did want to have an advisor, that you should at least educate yourself a little bit on things so that you know what they're talking about, and you're not just going in blind and just buying whatever they're trying to sell you. Because remember, most advisors make money off of how much that you have invested with them. So they make money off of your assets just like you do. So what I would do is go with someone that's a fee-only advisor. So you can go with a financial advisor that makes money on assets under management, where say you put $100,000 in and they take 2% of, or 1% or 2% of whatever you have invested. But if you go with someone that is fee only, you might pay them $200 up front. They look at your financial situation and they say, hey, if I was in your situation, this is what I would do. And in that situation, they don't have any skin in the game, so to say. They're getting their fee, whatever they advise you to do. So they're much less likely to be biased towards hey, this fund is going to be really good. But in reality, the reason they're directing you towards that fund when it's assets under management is maybe they get a higher percentage from that fund.
Okay, so there's something called a fee only. Is that just a one-time advisor?
So you would sign up with this person, say you meet with them once every 6 months, and each time it's for an hour and you pay them $150 and you say, okay, this is what I have going on. What do you think about it? And they say, okay, this is what I would change, or I would do this, or whatever. But you get a lot less biased information that way. Because
so assets under management means that they make money each time your assets go up or down.
They make money based on how much you have invested no matter what. So if the investments do great or they don't do well, it doesn't matter, they're still getting paid. And a lot of times they have an incentive to push you to certain funds that they get paid more from, which is not a good thing. So, you want to go to someone that's unbiased. So if it was me and I wanted to go to a financial advisor, which I still might at some point, because it would be nice to have someone look over my shoulder and make sure I'm right about everything that
Because again, we're not financial professionals, we are physical therapists.
Yeah, so I would go definitely to someone that's fee only and pay them a one-time fee or a yearly fee to just be like, okay, am I missing anything? Is there anything I did wrong? Like, is there something I should change? Those kind of questions. But you should still try to educate yourself as much as you can.
Yeah. So again, we will link to some stuff. There are some good resources, some good books, podcasts, and blogs that you guys can read to learn more. We don't want to make this too long and too complicated, but I do want to talk a little bit about in terms of exactly as a travel therapist, where might you lean more towards investing? One thing I think is important to think about is think about how much money you have extra, how much you can budget to invest. So if you know that in the beginning of your travel therapy career, you're going to be spending a lot of what you're making because you need to pay off your debt, or you have a house payment, or you have whatever, and you can only set aside or budget $10,000 a year or $5,000 a year or whatever, however much you think that you can put aside per year into investments. Then from there, think about where you're going to allocate it. Are you going to put it into brokerage accounts or IRA or 401k? If you were only going to put $6,000 or $7,000 aside into investments, you probably don't need to worry about a 401k if that's something that you're concerned about, because a lot of people ask us, okay, if you work for a travel company but then you switch jobs and you go work with another travel company, isn't that complicated because you start the 401k with this one and then you switch to this one? It can be complicated. So if that was the case and you were only going to contribute $6,000 anyway, probably just invest in an IRA because you own that account. An IRA is called an individual retirement account.
Unless the 401k you're planning to get a match from.
Right.
And that can be tough as a traveler because they have rules with how long you have to stay with the company before you get to keep the match.
So a lot of times, unless you plan on being career travel therapists like we are, like be travelers forever and ever, amen, if you're planning on just doing travel therapy for a couple of years, you might not even qualify for the match. There's a lot of hidden subtext where it says that you have to work with them for a certain number of contracts for a certain number of years before you actually even qualify for their match.
Yeah, the vesting period we've talked about in the past.
Yeah. So for those people who may only be putting a very small amount of money into investment, you might want to think about just an IRA first. So the max that you can contribute to an IRA, whether it's a traditional or a Roth, either one, or both, is $6,000 a year. Now, if you have more than $6,000 a year that you want to invest, okay, then you might look into, maybe I'll put a little in a 401k with my company for this one contract, or for all 4 contracts if you're working a whole year. Or maybe I'll put some in a brokerage account. So like I talked about, an IRA is just an account. You can log on to Vanguard.com or Fidelity.com or any number of these websites, and you can just register for an individual retirement account, and you can just transfer money from your bank right into there and then allocate which funds it's going to go into, and then you have an IRA and you can just leave it sitting there forever. A 401k you're going to sign up for with your company. So it might be certain companies, certain travel companies, you can contribute right away. So I know we work with a couple. If you guys are interested in which ones, you can contact us or just leave a comment that says you're interested in which travel companies. But there's a couple that you can contribute right away, which is helpful if you don't know if you're going to be doing traveling for very long.
And a couple you get the match right away too, which is nice.
Yeah, or if you don't know whether you're going to stay with the same company for every contract, it's nice to have the ones where you can just go ahead and start contributing to the 401k right away. Now, other ones you won't be able to. You have to wait like till the end of your first contract, or 60 days or 90 days or whatever, before you can start contributing to the company 401k, which is where it starts to get a little trickier. Now, a lot of questions we get too are like, okay, if you say I start a 401k with one company, but then later the next year or the next contract, I start a new 401k with another company. Now I have 2 401ks. What do I do with them?
You can... So say you open a traditional IRA and you're contributing to that, and you're also contributing to a 401k, and you leave that job with that 401k, you can roll that money over into the traditional IRA. It's a pretty easy process. So that's always what I would recommend doing. You can leave it there. You can leave it at that company's 401k for as long as you want, but usually those 401ks have higher fees. So I would roll it into a traditional IRA where you have less fees and more control over the money.
Yeah,
so,
and like Jared said, it's usually pretty easy. You would just contact, say I already have my IRA with Vanguard, and I have a 401k with one of my travel companies. Now, if I don't plan to work with that travel company anymore, or I just want it in my possession, I just would call up my IRA company.
You would call the IRA company and
So
say
I would
that you
call
want to
Vanguard,
roll money into
and
their
I want
IRA.
to roll money into my Vanguard account from a different institution, and they'll be happy to take your money. They'll say, yes, I will help you with that. I will help you roll over your 401k from this other company into our company, and then they just merge the accounts, and it's pretty easy.
Yep. So Jeff said, do you contribute right away even if there probably is theirs not matching? Yeah, we do. I wouldn't say that everyone should, but we like we were talking about. Whitney said the IRA limit is $6,000 a year. The 401k limit for investing is $19,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big advantage of 401ks is you can put a lot more money into it.
Mm-hmm.
So we're trying to max out, at least when we were working, back-to-back contracts, trying to work as much as possible. We were trying to max out all those tax advantage accounts as much as possible. So we were maxing out our 401k and our IRA. So we were contributing right away, trying to fill it up as quickly as we could.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not planning on saving, more than $6,000 per year for retirement, say you're splitting that between the brokerage account, paying down debt, and retirement accounts, then just go with an IRA and put $6,000 in there, and you can just skip the 401k, especially if you're probably not going to get a match anyway.
But you can contribute right away if you want to, regardless of whether they're going to match. Depending on what so some companies, it's like you can contribute right away, but they don't match right away.
Yeah.
Some companies, it's like there's a waiting period before you can contribute, and there's a waiting period before they do the match. So you just have to ask them the fine print. Just talk to the benefits department or get their, their pamphlet that talks about their benefits. And I have like a helpful for the companies that we work with or that we like. I kind of have like a little chart broken down. Like, okay, you can contribute right away with this one, but there's like a vesting period, or like you can't contribute. So you just have to ask those questions. But you could, for some companies, go ahead and contribute regardless of whether you get the match. Like the one company that we worked with for like 3 years straight, we could contribute that whole time, but we wouldn't get the match until we worked with them for a full 3 years of contracts. So we were contributing right away. So if we had stopped working with them at year 1 or year 2, we would have still had our contributions. We just wouldn't have had the match. But we went ahead and worked with them for the full 3 years, and we got both.
Yep.
So that's kind of how it works if you're switching between companies. Some people, it might be worth it if you really just have like a lot of cash that you're trying to put into investments very early and right away, then yes, it is worth it to do the 401k. If that's not the case for you, maybe it's not worth it to do the 401k.
Yeah, and remember that if you're doing some kind of student loan forgiveness program or income-based repayment program, it's probably in your best interest to get your payment as low as possible, because if you eventually have that money forgiven, you want to pay as much as you can along the way until you get to forgiveness, right? You don't want to pay $100,000 of your $110,000 loan and then have $10,000 forgiven. Instead, you'd want to pay $10,000, put that other $90,000 somewhere else, and then have $100,000 forgiven, right? So if you can get your payment as low as possible, that's great. Well, that's one of the big advantages of the retirement accounts, is that traditional accounts, at least like a traditional IRA, 401k, is that when you put money in there, it makes your adjusted gross income lower, which means that your student loan payment is then subsequently lower as well.
Okay.
So that's one other reason that we always try to max out our 401k and our traditional IRA.
I'm going to break that down for the financial dummies. Jared's getting a refill on champagne. Okay. When you contribute, for example, we contributed to a 401k, a traditional 401k with our company. What happens is they take that money out of your paycheck pre-tax. So my paycheck will say gross pay, $1,900 a week. And then it'll take out any deductions, and then it'll say net pay. This is what you're actually getting in your bank account every week. So the 401k contributions actually come out pre-tax if you have a traditional 401k. So what this does is it makes your taxable income look lower, which is called your adjusted gross income, your AGI, and that's what your student loan forgiveness is based on. So even though you might make X amount of money per year, X amount of money per contract, or X amount of money per week on a travel therapy contract, if you are contributing to your company-sponsored 401k, it's gonna, or even your IRA, it's gonna lower how much your taxable income is. And when you lower how much on paper you have as your taxable income, this is gonna lower your payment on your student loan forgiveness or your income-driven repayment, because when it comes time to submit your paperwork for your income-driven repayment to the government, all that they ask for is, well, they ask for your tax return, but all that shows on your tax return is your adjusted gross income, your AGI, which is just based on your taxable income. So it doesn't show your stipends. It doesn't show the money that you took out pre-tax to put into your 401k.
No
to
reimbursements.
pay yourself first, basically, more or less. It doesn't show the reimbursements. So this is the huge thing about travel therapists. Like Jared says, as PTs working, when we were working 4 contracts a year, a full year of travel therapy contracts, we were essentially making twice as much as a regular physical therapist.
Our income looked like half as much as a regular physical
Yeah,
therapist.
our income on paper looked super low because 1, only half of it was taxed because of the travel therapy benefits. 2, we were contributing to pre-tax accounts, a traditional IRA and a traditional 401k. So even though we're making the equivalent of a perm therapist at $120,000 a year gross or whatever, we're really only on paper net or
Lower than that.
yeah. So this is something huge to think about
And it's-
contributing to pre-tax accounts, these traditional IRAs or a
Yeah.
401k.
It's a self-perpetuating cycle too. The more you contribute to the 401k and the traditional IRA, the lower your payment. The lower your payment, the more you can contribute, because then you don't have as much that you're paying out to the loans, so you can put more into the traditional IRA and the 401k. So it's a really cool cycle that we've
So
taken
this
advantage
is
of.
kind of like just the loophole of being travel therapists that also have high debt, like we did. Like I had 140,000 or something in debt, who also plan to go for forgiveness because I plan to be a travel therapist for the foreseeable future. So I'm really benefiting tax-wise from this loophole, more or less. Whereas a lot of people, it's like, I don't want to worry about all that. I just want to pay off the debt. But we're just talking about some ways that it's worked well for us.
Yep.
We have a couple other things to talk about. Who has questions so far about what we've talked about? If you guys have more questions that are tuning in live, we would love for you to just comment below. I know some of this stuff is hard to follow. And Jared has written a lot of financial articles, so we can link to some of those to help for those of you guys that it's easier to read in text form. So yeah, if you have
The
questions.
last thing we want to talk about is what your investment options are inside those accounts. So like I said, whether it's a brokerage account, a traditional IRA, 401k, your options are more limited, but inside those accounts, like what you invest in, right?
Yeah. So these 3 accounts, you can have a 401k, an IRA, or a brokerage account. They could all be. You could have all these types of accounts through the same companies, through Vanguard, through Fidelity, etc. But the way that they're taxed and the way that the amounts that you can put in and all that kind of stuff are a little bit different. But yeah, within those 3 accounts, within a brokerage account or an IRA account or a 401k, you have to allocate your funds to whatever type of stocks, bonds, whatever you want to put it in. So Holly, to answer your question, talking about a financial advisor, this is some of the things that a financial advisor would help you understand. Like, what funds should I invest in? Should I just put 100% in Apple or Google or Facebook or Starbucks? Probably not. You probably want to diversify more than that. So
Yep. So let's just use the brokerage account as an example. So you put some money in there. So you have $10,000 that you put in there, and you want to figure out where you should invest that money, right? So in general, you have stocks or bonds. Those are the 2 biggest asset classes that everybody talks about. So stocks are more volatile, but they usually have higher returns. So when you own a stock in a company, that means that as the company's valuation increases, you own a portion of the company. So kind of like you become a tiny owner of that company when you buy a stock. So as the value of the company increases, your value of your share, your ownership of the company increases as well. So when you buy that stock, that's your ownership of the company. When you buy a bond, you're basically, the company takes out debt. So like if a company wants to borrow money, they could borrow it from bondholders. Like they would sell some bonds to raise money for their company. And when they sell those bonds, it would be like, okay, we want to borrow $100 million, and we will pay you 4% interest on that $100 million. So as an individual, you might say, okay, I'm going to invest $2,000 in bonds, and that bond has a interest rate of 4 or 5% or something like that. So you'd get a guaranteed 4 or 5%. So the difference between stocks and bonds is that when you buy a bond, it's a guaranteed rate of return, unless the company like defaults or if it's like a treasury bond, the U.S. government, then that's almost guaranteed that they're not going to default, which is usually a lower interest rate. But anyway, that's almost like a guaranteed return. Whereas a stock, you're a partial owner of the company, which means that if the value of the company goes up, you make money. If the value of the company goes down, you lose money. And sometimes it doesn't make sense. The stock market can go up and down for no reason, or value of a stock can go up and down for no reason. And so like Whitney was saying, if you invest in, so say like you put all of your money in one particular stock, and then, so say that was like, I don't know, United Airlines, and then United has a plane crash. The value of that stock is going to drop because people are going to be like, oh no, this negative publicity is bad, I'm going to sell my stock, right? So the value of the company is going to go down. So you're going to lose money, you're going to lose a lot of money. It might only be temporarily, but the stock value will go down. Or something like Facebook, when they get in trouble for selling data or something like that, their stock value goes way down. So if you are only invested in one stock, you might get lucky and it goes way up, but you also might get really unlucky and something happens and the company goes out of business and you lose everything.
You're like, what if you'd invested in like MySpace?
Yeah, I mean. And
you're like, oh, MySpace is gonna be the biggest thing in the world, and then you put like $100,000 in MySpace, and then it just.
Yeah, 12 years ago, I would have thought that everyone was gonna have a top 6 forever, right?
But I've been in your top 6.
No. But so yeah, you don't want to put all your money in one.
Because top 8.
One company, whatever it was. Because you never know. It could go way up or it could go way down. So you don't want to give yourself that much risk. So. And
you also, it's hard to pick individual stocks. I mean, there's a lot of, like, I had a patient once that was like, it was his favorite thing to like, he was like, PayPal. He would come in every Tuesday, Thursday. You got to invest in PayPal. And that was fun for him to like pick individual stocks. But then you're like trying to predict the market. You're trying to predict which companies are going to do well. Thanks, George. I'm glad you liked our little joke.
Yeah.
Who was in your top 8, George? So anyway, it's hard to pick individual stocks. So we don't recommend that. Like, yeah, if you really think that like Apple is just going to be on the top forever, like you could put a little bit of money in Apple. Okay, it's probably going to be pretty safe. But like, don't put all your money in Apple. So don't put all your money in one individual stock, is what we're saying.
Yeah, and I can say that if I still had my MySpace, my song would have been Old Town Road right now. I still like that song a lot. I'll sing it. It'll get stuck in my head and I'll sing it all day. So Old Town Road, what would yours have been?
I heard this little girl in a cafe in, where were we? Versailles. We were in Versailles, France, and there was a little girl singing Old Town Road.
Yeah. It's everywhere.
I don't know what my song would have been.
Okay, so
anyway.
So you don't want to invest in one stock. But so then there's mutual funds. Basically, a mutual fund is a collection of stocks, and usually a financial advisor will they will advise you on, okay, this mutual fund's doing well. So let's say that there's a mutual fund that's weighted towards technology, and George said, was it top 6 or top 8?
I think it was top 8.
It might have been
It
top
might
8.
have started at 6, and I think they expanded to 8 because you just had to have more friends than that. Also, we were sweating like profusely. There's no AC
hot
here, and we're drinking champagne.
And it's past midnight. So say you have a mutual fund that's it was weighted towards technology stocks. So they have like Facebook, Apple, Google, all those stocks. They might do really well, or they might not do that well. So say you have 40 companies there, so you have a little bit less risk, because if you have 40 companies that your money's invested in a mutual fund, if Facebook does really poorly, that's only 1/40th of your investment. Versus if you had all your money in Facebook, then you'd lose a lot of money. So a mutual fund is a little safer. The problem with a mutual fund is that usually they have high expenses. And the reason they have high expenses is because there's a person in charge of that mutual fund that is picking which stocks to put in and take out of the mutual fund, right? So in order to compensate that person, compensate the company, there's higher expenses. So what I prefer to do, and I think is usually the smart thing for most people, is to invest in an index fund. So an index fund, so let's use the example of the S&P 500, is a fund that owns a portion of all the top 500 biggest companies in the U.S. So it'll own like a proportional size, or proportional share of how much that company, how big it is in the S&P 500. So I think the biggest company is Apple. So your biggest investment in there would be Apple, but you'd still own the next 499 biggest companies in the U.S. So then you have a lot. If you go to the stock app on your phone and you look at S&P 500 return, or you just type in S&P 500 on Google and you see it going up and down each day, that is the S&P 500 return. So if you have money in an S&P 500 index, you're mimicking that movement exactly, right? So if you put money in there and the cumulative 500 companies, the biggest ones in the U.S. go up, then you make money. If they go down, then you lose money. The good thing about an index fund is since it just tracks that index, it's not actively managed, which means there's not someone in charge that's taking companies in and out. It's just tracking that index, which means that the fees are usually really low. You might think that having someone pick which stocks are going to do good would be a good thing, like in a mutual fund. So you might be like, okay, I might pay more for a mutual fund, but at least have someone that's like, hey, there's no way Facebook's going to keep going up. I'm going to take them out and put this company in, right? That might be a good thing. But in reality, what you find out is that the research shows that usually the people picking stocks don't do that well. They don't do any better than the market, and so it doesn't justify that higher expense. So we prefer to invest in index funds that are passively managed.
Yep. So to recap, we're talking about where you... Thanks, George. Hi, Mom. Thanks, George. George says it was, in fact, a top 8 on the MySpace. And if anyone can remember their top 8, I would just love to read it, even though I probably won't know your friends. Okay. We're talking about once you have an account, you have a 401k or an IRA or a brokerage account, then within that account, you have to decide where you want your money to be invested. You could pick individual stocks, not really recommended. You could also pick mutual funds. Oh, well, you could pick bonds, which is another thing, but bonds are less risk, but also less return.
Yep.
Stocks are higher risk, higher returns.
In general, every investment that you can possibly make is going to have an inverse relationship between risk and reward.
Mm-hmm.
So the higher risk, usually I guess it's actually a proportional relationship, because the higher the risk, usually the higher return. The lower the risk, the lower return in general.
Some of the accounts, don't they even ask you, like they'll take you through a prompt of like, how risk averse are you? And you might say like moderate, and they might even make some suggestions. So there are some companies that, like without even having a financial advisor, will make some suggestions for you by asking you like profile questions, like how risk averse are you? Or, what types of things are you interested in? So you can invest in individual stocks, probably not recommended. You can invest in individual mutual funds, a little bit better than individual stocks, but probably the best thing that most people will recommend from a lot of the books that Jared's read and a lot of podcasts.
Most unbiased people will recommend.
Most unbiased people will recommend that you invest in index funds, which an example would be the S&P 500. There's like international funds. There's
index funds
metals,
for everything.
There's index funds that are basically a group of companies. So you're more diversified. So you're already diversified because you've got some money in cash, you've got an emergency fund, you've maybe got a 401k and an IRA and a brokerage account. So you're already diversified. But then even within those accounts, you're going to be more diversified because you're going to choose index funds, hopefully is what we would recommend. So then when the market goes up and down, you're going to have less risk of being invested in just one or two companies.
Yep. So yeah, that's what we'd recommend. There's a lot of books. The two that I'd recommend are The Boglehead's Guide to Investing. That was a book that I think was probably the most important one that I've ever read. I've read it a few times now on investing, and that talks a lot about index funds and why you would choose index funds over mutual funds or trying to pick your own stocks. And then the other one is The Simple Path to Wealth, which is a really good book just about on saving, investing, index funds.
Yeah, so we'll link to those two books. There's a podcast that we really like. It's called Choose FI, which stands for Choose Financial Independence. They're really deep into financial topics, and they talk about all kinds of stuff. But if you look at some of their original podcasts where they talk about kind of more of the basics, is really helpful. And that talks a lot about like what Jared is working towards financial independence, or what he's actually achieved, financial independence at the age of 30. Choose FI. There's also, what are the other podcasts?
There's tons of financial podcasts you can listen to. Mad Scientist I like a lot, and Radical Personal Finance is really good, and Stacking Benjamins is a pretty good podcast. There's a lot of finance podcasts.
Who's
that are
the
very
lady?
good. Afford Anything. Paula Pant is really good.
So
there's tons of books, podcasts. If you guys want any recommendations besides those, I can definitely send you a list. I've read probably 100 or more personal finance books now, and I've listened to thousands and thousands of hours, no joke, of
and I get the Cliff Notes.
Yeah, personal finance investing podcast.
Yep. Choose FI Facebook. Josh says the Choose
Josh,
FI Facebook group is
I don't know if you know
community.
this, but I think it was episode 91, 91R maybe. I was on Choose FI a while back, so I wrote an article about it. But yeah, I love the Choose F5 podcast in the group. And
they also have just published a book that'll be coming out soon with our friend Chris.
Yep, Chris.
Who's also a PT, which will be interesting to you guys, so we can share that information as well. Do you know the title?
I think it might be called Choose F5, like Blueprint to Financial Success or something like that.
So they have a book coming out, which is awesome. There's a lot of good resources out there. And to our friend Holly that was on earlier, and I know a lot of you have probably the same questions as Holly about whether or not you need a financial advisor. Maybe. And there are some good people that we could point you in the direction of. Some people that are actually linked in with the physical therapy community that we could point you in the right direction of if you want to send us a message. But I think there's a lot of information out there. I mean, it's 2019. There's books, there's podcasts, there's blogs. There's lots of things out there that you can learn on your own. And it doesn't have to be complicated. The biggest thing, if you're going into travel therapy, the biggest thing is you have the opportunity to make more money. If you can just live frugally, keep your expenses low, and set aside a certain amount of money to either invest or save or pay off your debt, you're going to come out ahead financially. That's the biggest thing. So just keep it simple. And just remember, you are in a unique opportunity to be a travel therapist, to be able to go out on the road, have adventures, and also earn a higher income. And you don't have to do the great American rat race.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep up with the Joneses with everything. You don't have to just spend more because you make more. You can keep living frugally.
Have more flexibility in your life. Save a lot so that you don't have to work all the time. You can take trips like we do, or you can work part-time or do whatever you want to do. So Adam said the book is called Your Blueprint to Financial Independence. So I just talked to Chris today, actually. Chris, I think his name is Mamula. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
The authors, Chris, Brad, and Jonathan, yep.
I'm going to get an advanced copy of it, so I'll probably write a review or something about it, but hopefully it'll be awesome.
So Chris is our friend. We actually went on a hike with Chris and his wife. Chris is also a PT who pursued early financial independence early in his career and is now retired as a PT, and he has a great blog and website that he runs as well, and Jared and him keep in touch. So it's going to be a really good book. We're excited to read it.
So if you guys made it through this, that's pretty awesome. We made it through that whole bottle of champagne during this.
I have just a little bit left.
This Facebook Live, so that's pretty good. So to recap, you make more money as a traveler, like Whitney was saying, which is great. Try to live frugally, try to save as much as you can, save an emergency fund first, get rid of consumer debt, especially, as a new grad, maybe you accumulated some consumer debt, you don't have a lot of savings. Get rid of that, save an emergency fund first. Ideally, probably 3 to 6 months, just in case. It's always nice to have that cash cushion, if anything comes up, or if you want to take time off, say like a huge opportunity arises, one of your friends is hiking the Appalachian Trail or something, you're like, oh, I've got all this money saved, I can just go do that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's nice to have. From there, probably pay off your private debt as soon as you can, private student loans, and then from there, determine what you want to do with your student loans, public ones, if you want to pay them off quickly, like a lot of people choose to do, or if you want to go for forgiveness and invest instead. And then we talked a little bit about what your options are in those accounts, different accounts. So I thought this was going to be like a 20-minute video. I think we're probably over an hour.
They're always long. We just have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
But this topic is so big and it's so huge, and I know it's complicated because I am literally a financial dummy, and I know that a lot of people who you're like, I studied my whole life to be a therapist. I don't know anything about finances, but we need to know some stuff about finances. So reach out to us if you have questions.
Yeah.
Check out our blog, fifthwheelpt.com, because that's where Jared writes the most about finances. We also have a few good articles on traveltherapymentor.com where we talk about like student loans or specifically about travel therapy and finances. Some good information on there.
Yeah. If you guys are watching this on replay, definitely just send us a question or comment here. We'll always go back to these videos and answer questions.
Hit the like button, hit the heart button. That way we know that you watched and you enjoyed it, and hopefully some other people will be able to tune in later. Again, we are in France. We are traveling through Europe right now, so I know the timing isn't super convenient. But it is because of travel therapy and financial planning and everything that we've been able to travel for long periods of time because we've been smart with our money and saved a lot. So we're traveling around Europe right now just for fun without working for 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, and it's 12:40 here, so
we're gonna go to bed.
So if anyone's going to the National Student Conclave, we would love to meet you guys. Let us know. Hopefully during that presentation I don't get too nervous, but we'll see how that goes.
And we won't be having any champagne during the National Student Conclave. So.
Next week I think we'll hopefully probably try to do this video again on Sunday next week.
if possible.
If possible, we're going to be in Brussels, I'm pretty sure. So I don't know what our situation will be like there as far as Airbnbs and everything. Actually, I think we're staying in a hotel there. So
Yeah,
hopefully
so
we'll
hopefully
have
it'll be good.
Wi-Fi. But yeah, it should be Sunday. Thanks for watching.
Thank you guys so much for watching and tuning in. We appreciate it. We appreciate any comments you leave us, any likes, thumbs up, any hearts you give us, any questions you send us via messenger. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep. All right.
All right.
See you guys.
We'll see you guys next week.